New Year's Eve at Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, Vivian Ashford stood at the host stand of Lumiere and heard words she had never heard in her 42 years of life. No tables available. She could buy this building. She could buy the entire block. She had been on the cover of Fortune magazine 3 times. She had made billionaires go silent in boardrooms where she held all the power. But tonight, she could not buy a seat. The host was young, polished, professionally apologetic. He smiled the way service workers smiled when delivering bad news to someone they assumed could handle it. His eyes showed no recognition. To him, she was just a woman without a reservation. Vivian stood there, expensive coat draped over her arm, designer heels planted on marble floor, and felt something crawling up her spine. Powerlessness. The restaurant glowed like a jewelry box around her. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across white tablecloths. Families filled every table. Children in velvet dresses counted down the hours until midnight. Couples leaned close over wine, their laughter rolling through the space in waves, comfortable and easy, like people who belonged to each other. Vivian belonged to no one. She had left her assistant at home, no driver waiting outside, no reservation made weeks in advance. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight she had wanted to walk into a restaurant like a normal person and sit down for dinner. Just Vivian. Not the CEO, not the empire builder, not the woman whose name made competitors nervous. But the universe had other plans. She thought about offering money. She could triple the price of any table. She could buy someone else's evening and take their spot. The words formed in her throat but stayed there. Buying her way in would only confirm what she already suspected. She did not belong here. Not tonight, not any night. Vivian turned toward the exit. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step a small defeat. Around her, the restaurant pulsed with warmth she could not touch. A father poured sparkling cider for his young son. A grandmother wiped frosting from a toddler's cheek. A couple raised their glasses and touched them together, soft and certain. She had shaped markets, launched products, changed entire industries. But she could not negotiate herself a family. Her hand reached for the door. Cold air slipped through the gap, sharp against her face. Then she heard it. A small voice, clear and curious, cutting through the noise like a bell. A child's voice. "Daddy, look at her!" Vivian turned back without meaning to. Near the center of the dining room, a little girl was standing on her chair, one hand gripping the edge of the table. She was maybe 7 years old with dark curls pinned back with a glittery clip that caught the chandelier light. She was staring directly at Vivienne with the kind of open attention children gave to things that puzzled them. The girl tugged on the sleeve of the man sitting beside her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a simple button-down shirt that looked carefully ironed, but not expensive. His tie was slightly crooked. He had the kind of face that carried weight without complaint, tired eyes, strong hands, the look of someone who had learned to keep moving even when everything told him to stop. He glanced at his daughter, then followed her gaze across the room. His eyes found Vivian standing frozen in the doorway. The girl said something Vivian could not hear. The man leaned down, listening. His expression shifted. Surprise, maybe, or hesitation. He looked at Vivian again, longer this time. Then he straightened. He glanced at the empty chair across from him. He looked back at Vivian. And slowly, almost awkwardly, he raised one hand and waved. It was not a grand gesture. It was not confident. His hand lifted, hesitant, stayed there for only a second, then dropped back to the table. But it was unmistakable. An invitation. Vivian stood completely still. People did not invite her to things. People asked her for things. People wanted her approval, her investment, her signature on contracts worth millions. But no one just waved her over to share a table on New Year's Eve. The little girl was smiling now, bouncing on her chair. She waved too, both hands high in the air, as if Vivian were someone she had been waiting for her whole life. Every eye in the restaurant seemed to turn. The host noticed. A waiter slowed near the kitchen door. A woman at the next table leaned toward her husband and whispered. Vivian's instinct was to leave. Walk out with dignity intact. Pretend this moment never happened. Accepting help from strangers meant admitting she needed it. But her hand had already released the door. Her feet had already turned. She walked back through the restaurant, past tables full of families, past the surprised host, past conversations that paused and resumed around her. She reached the table where the man and the little girl waited. Up close, she could see the girl's dress was slightly wrinkled, like it had been packed in a suitcase. There were two plates on the table, half finished, a glass of water, a pink lemonade with a paper straw. The man stood when she arrived. He did not offer his hand or introduce himself with a title. He just gestured to the empty chair. "We have an extra seat, if you want it." His voice was careful and kind. Vivian looked at him. She looked at the girl who was grinning like this was the best idea anyone had ever had. She looked at the empty chair. Then she made a choice that had nothing to do with strategy. She sat down. The girl introduced herself immediately. "I'm Rosalie, but everyone calls me Rosie. I'm 7 3/4. I like unicorns and science and mac and cheese. In that order." She talked the way children talked when they were not performing for adults. Fast, honest, without filter. She asked if Vivian liked the restaurant, if she was here alone, if she had any kids. Vivian answered quietly, unsure how to match the girl's energy. "No kids. Yes. Alone." The restaurant was beautiful. The man finally spoke. His name was Callum Renly. He did not explain why he had waved her over. He did not apologize for the intrusion or make a joke to ease the strangeness. He just said it was nice to meet her and asked if she had eaten. Vivian said she had not. Callum flagged down a waiter without hesitation, as if inviting strangers to dinner on New Year's Eve was something he did all the time. Vivian sat with her hands folded, her coat draped over the chair. She felt exposed, awkward, like she had stumbled into someone else's story and did not know her lines. But Rosie kept talking, kept asking questions, kept pulling Vivian into the moment with fearless curiosity that left no room for retreat. And Callum, steady and unhurried across the table, did not try to fill every silence. He just let it sit. Let her sit. Let the evening unfold however it needed to. Rosie tilted her head and studied Vivian with the intensity of a scientist examining something rare. "You know what?" the girl said, her voice suddenly serious. "You look like a big house with nobody living inside. But a house needs people to be a home." The words landed somewhere deep in Vivian's chest. She had no response. No one had ever named her emptiness so simply. The waiter arrived with a menu. Vivian accepted it without looking at prices. Old habit. Rosie asked what her favorite color was. Blue. Rosie nodded seriously. Her own favorite was purple. Not pink, because everyone always assumed pink. She asked if Vivian liked animals. Vivian said she did, though she had no pets. Rosie wanted a dog, a golden retriever, or maybe a husky, or actually one of those fluffy white ones that look like clouds. Callum listened with the patience of someone who had heard this list 100 times before. He did not interrupt. He just let his daughter talk. And Vivian noticed the way he watched Rosie, the way his whole posture softened when she smiled. Food arrived. Chicken tenders for Rosie, steak for Callum, salmon for Vivian. Rosie talked between bites. Did Vivian like roller coasters? Had she been to the ocean? What was her favorite pizza? Plain cheese. Rosie declared this was the only correct answer, and Vivian found herself smiling. Not the smile she wore in boardrooms or photographs, something softer, something real. Rosie announced she needed the bathroom. Callum stood immediately, but Rosie shook her head. "I can go by myself. I'm 7 3/4. That's old enough." She slid off her chair and marched away, glittery hair clip bouncing with each step. The table fell quiet. Vivian searched for something to say that was not small talk or prying. "How long have you and Rosie lived in the city?" Callum looked slightly surprised by the question. "About 3 years. We moved from Boston after my wife passed." He said it simply, without drama, the way people stated facts they had carried long enough to speak without breaking. Vivian felt the air change. "I'm sorry." Callum nodded, accepting it with grace and no expectation of more. "Her name was Meridian. Mary. She was sick a long time. Cancer." He paused. "Rosie was 4 when she died, old enough to remember her mother, but young enough that the memories are starting to fade." He looked toward the hallway where his daughter had disappeared. It was hard at first, figuring out how to be both parents, how to braid hair and pack lunches and show up to school plays when all I wanted was to disappear into my grief. His voice stayed steady, but Vivian heard the weight beneath it. But Rosie needed me. That need pulled me forward, one day at a time, until the days became years and the weight became something I knew how to carry. Vivian listened without interrupting. She did not offer advice, did not try to compare his pain to anything in her own life. She just listened. Callum seemed to appreciate that. I used to be an architect, he said, but after Mary got sick, I quit. Needed work I could do with my hands, something that kept me too busy to think. A small smile crossed his face. I make furniture now. Tables, chairs, bookshelves, everything by hand. Vivian thought about her own mornings. Alarm at 5, coffee by the window, emails answered before sunrise. She had built her life around control and achievement, but she had never needed another person to make sense of any of it. Callum asked if she had family in the city. The question made her walls rise. She could deflect, give a vague answer, steer towards safer ground. But something about the way he asked, without agenda or expectation, made her want to tell the truth. No, my parents died years ago. I have a brother in Seattle. We don't talk much. She paused. Work consumed everything, and by the time I looked up, everyone I cared about had stopped waiting for me. The words came out rawer than intended. Callum did not rush to respond. He just nodded, as if he understood completely. Loneliness is strange, he said. It can exist in crowded rooms. It can exist in successful lives. Sometimes the more you achieve, the more alone you become. Something cracked open in Vivian's chest. She had spent years telling herself she did not need anyone, that independence and strength were the same thing. Sitting across from Callum Renly, she finally admitted the truth she had been hiding. She was lonely. She had been lonely for a very long time. Rosie returned, breathless and excited. There's a giant fish tank in the hallway. I counted 17 fish, but one was hiding, so maybe 18. Callum asked if she washed her hands. Rosie held them up as evidence. The moment passed, easy and warm. Then Callum stood to refill water glasses, and something fell from his jacket pocket. A business card. Vivian glanced at it without thinking. Renly Woodcraft. Handmade furniture. And beneath the address, an email domain that made her breath catch. See renlyashfordalumni.org. Ashford Alumni. The network for former employees of her company, Ashford Industries. This man's wife had worked for her. The restaurant door opened and cold air swept through the room. Vivian looked up. A man in his mid-50s entered. Silver hair perfectly styled, expensive suit tailored to precision. A young woman who looked half his age followed behind him. Vivian recognized him instantly. Desmond Hargrove, her former mentor, the man who taught her everything about power and strategy 15 years ago, when she was young and hungry and desperate to prove herself. The same man who tried to take her company 5 years ago. He failed. He never forgave her. Desmond's eyes swept the restaurant with the casual arrogance of someone who expected the world to arrange itself around him. His gaze landed on Vivian. He smiled. It was not a kind smile. He walked toward their table, his companion trailing behind. Vivian Ashford, dining alone on New Year's Eve? His voice was smooth and sharp at the same time. Oh, wait, not alone. His eyes moved to Callum and Rosie with exaggerated interest. And who do we have here? This doesn't look like your usual circle. Vivian felt her stomach drop. Her identity was about to be exposed. Everything she had been trying to escape tonight was crashing down. Callum looked at her. Understanding slowly crossed his face. Ashford Industries. She was the CEO. Desmond leaned closer, voice dropping to a stage whisper. I heard your fourth quarter numbers were disappointing. The board is getting nervous, but I'm sure you have everything under control. He straightened, adjusting his cufflinks with theatrical precision. Happy New Year, Vivian. I'm certain we'll be seeing much more of each other very soon. He turned to leave, but Rosie's voice stopped him. Mister? Desmond paused, looking down at the 7-year-old with barely hidden irritation. Rosie tilted her head. Why do you smile with your mouth but your eyes stay cold? My daddy says real smiles have to be in your eyes too. Desmond's face went pale. For a long moment, he had no response. Then he turned and walked away without another word. The silence at the table felt heavy. Callum looked at Vivian. You're the CEO, Ashford Industries. It was not a question. Yes. My wife worked for you. I didn't know. 3,000 employees. I couldn't remember every name. Callum was quiet for a long moment. Mary never complained about your company. She said it was a good place. She was just sad she couldn't keep working when she got sick. Vivian felt tears building. 3,000 employees, she said, her voice barely a whisper. And I never learned their names. Never asked about their lives. I was so focused on building something big that I forgot to see the people inside it. A tear slipped down her cheek. She could not remember the last time she had cried. Rosie climbed down from her chair and walked around the table. She held out a napkin. Crying is okay, she said softly. Daddy says tears are how your heart takes a bath. Your heart must have been really dirty for a really long time. Vivian laughed through her tears. Callum laughed too, and something shifted between them. Something that felt like possibility. Vivian looked at Callum. You knew who I was? Callum shook his head. Not until just now, when he said your name. And you don't hate me? For being part of a company that employed your wife while she was dying? Callum's expression softened. Mary's illness wasn't your fault. You didn't even know we existed. I spent 2 years being angry at the whole world. It almost destroyed me. He looked at his daughter, who had climbed back into her seat. Rosie saved me. She needed a father, not a broken man drowning in rage. So I let go of the anger, not for anyone else. For myself. For her. Vivian wiped her eyes. How do you do it? Move forward after losing everything? Callum thought about it. You don't move forward by forgetting. You move forward by building something new, something worth living for. The clock on the wall showed 11:50, 10 minutes until midnight. Rosie grabbed Vivian's hand. You're staying for the countdown, right? Please? Please, please, please. Vivian looked at the little girl with her glittery clip and hopeful eyes. She looked at Callum, watching her with patient silence. She could leave. Thank them. Return to her penthouse. Pour scotch and watch fireworks through the window. Alone, like every year before, or she could stay. Okay, I'll stay. Rosie squealed with joy. The restaurant cleared as guests moved toward the windows. Vivian stood between Callum and Rosie, the little girl positioned in the middle, holding both their hands. The crowd began counting. 10, 9, 8. Vivian looked around at faces glowing in chandelier light. Couples embracing, families holding tight. Strangers smiling at strangers. 7, 6, 5. Callum looked down at Rosie, then across at Vivian. 4, 3, 2, 1. The room exploded with cheers. Outside the windows, fireworks burst across the Manhattan skyline. Gold and silver, red and white, light cascading over the city like celebration made visible. Rosie jumped up and down, still gripping their hands. Then she turned and hugged her father, fierce and tight. Then she turned to Vivian. Small arms wrapped around Vivian's waist before she could react. Vivian stood frozen. Then slowly, carefully, she placed her hands on Rosie's back and returned the hug. The girl smelled like chocolate and strawberry shampoo. Something inside Vivian released, not painfully, gently, like a door that had been locked too long finally swinging open. Rosie pulled back, face bright. Happy New Year. I wish you'd always have dinner with us. You're not sad anymore. Your smile is really pretty when it's real. Callum extended his hand. Vivian took it. His grip was warm and firm. He held on just a moment longer than necessary. It was good to meet you, he said. Really. And she understood he meant it. Not good to network. Not good to leverage. Just good to meet her as a person on a night when neither of them should have been alone. The restaurant emptied. Callum helped Rosie into her coat. The girl was yawning now, energy finally fading. Vivian put on her own coat, fingers fumbling with buttons. Callum reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. If you ever want a table built, or a bookshelf, or just coffee with two people who think you're worth knowing. He held it out. You know how to find us. Vivian took the card. Their fingers brushed. Thank you, she said. For tonight. Callum smiled. It was Rosie's idea. Rosie, half asleep against her father's side, mumbled. She looked lonely. Callum did not correct her. He just looked at Vivian with gentle understanding, and Vivian nodded because it was true. She walked home through celebrating crowds. Confetti drifted through the air. Groups spilled from bars and restaurants, singing and dancing and holding each other. Vivian moved through it all like a visitor from another world. But the loneliness felt different now. Not the hollow ache she had carried for years. Something sharper, more immediate. The loneliness of discovering warmth and having to walk away from it. Her penthouse was exactly as she left it. Cold, quiet, beautiful in a way that meant nothing. She walked to the window and pressed her hand against the glass. Below, the city celebrated. Above, the sky glowed with fading fireworks. Vivian stood between them, suspended in expensive silence. She thought about Rosie's words. A house needs people to be a home. She had owned this penthouse 5 years. It had never been a home. She did not sleep that night. She sat by the window and watched the city grow quiet. Celebrations faded. Streets emptied. Around 4 in the morning, snow began to fall. Vivian thought about all the New Year's Eve she had spent alone. The scotch, the silence, the fireworks watched through glass, always outside looking in. Tonight had been different. A little girl saw her standing alone and decided she deserved better. A man who owed her nothing offered her a seat at his table. She had cried in front of strangers and been handed a napkin by a 7-year-old who said her heart needed a bath. Vivian laughed softly in the darkness. Her heart had been dirty for a very long time. When morning light crept through the windows, she did not reach for her phone to check emails. She did not review her calendar. She did not think about quarterly reports or board meetings or Desmond Hargrove's threats. She stood at the window and watched the sun rise over Manhattan, and she made herself a promise. Not to be perfect, not to have all the answers. Just to try, to reach out, to let people in, to take up space not because she was powerful, but because she was human. She pulled out her phone and found her brother's name, Bennett Ashford. They had not spoken in 3 years. She declined his Thanksgiving invitation because of a board meeting. He stopped inviting her after that. She typed a message, deleted it, typed again, deleted again. Finally, she wrote, "Happy New Year. I've been thinking about you. I'm sorry for the past few years. I want to change." She read it 3 times, then pressed send before she could talk herself out of it. Her phone buzzed an hour later, a message from Bennett. "I've been waiting 3 years to hear from you. When are you flying to Seattle?" Vivian smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. 3 weeks later, she landed in Seattle. Bennett met her at the airport. He looked older than she remembered, more gray in his hair, more lines around his eyes. But when he hugged her, it felt like no time had passed. They spent a week together, talking, crying, laughing about memories they had both forgotten. When Vivian left, she made him promise to visit New York. "For New Year's Eve," she said, "I have people I want you to meet." Bennett raised an eyebrow. "People?" Vivian smiled. "Family." 1 year later, New Year's Eve. Lumiere restaurant, the same table. Vivian walked through the door. This time she did not walk alone. Callum stood when he saw her. His smile was warm and familiar now. The smile of someone who had become more than a friend over 12 months of coffee dates that became dinners, dinners that became weekends, building furniture in his workshop, while Rosie did homework at the corner table. Somewhere along the way, 3 separate lives had woven into one. Rosie waved both hands in the air, bouncing in her seat just like she had 1 year ago. "Miss Vivian, remember last year? You were standing by the door all by yourself. Now you have us." And sitting beside them, looking slightly nervous but genuinely happy, was Bennett, her brother. First time in New York in 4 years. The table had 4 chairs. None of them were empty. Rosie grabbed Vivian's hand and pulled her close to whisper, "Last year you were the saddest person here." This year, you smile the most. Then she leaned back, expression suddenly serious. Can I call you something? Not Miss Vivian. Something else. Vivian's heart caught. What do you want to call me? Rosie bit her lip, thinking hard. You're not my mom. My mom is in heaven. But you're like home. Daddy says home is where people love you. And I love you. She looked up with eyes full of hope. So maybe I can call you my Vivian. Because you're mine now. You're ours. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. Vivian stood at the window with her family. Her family. The word still felt new and wonderful. 7, 6, 5. Callum's hand found hers in the crowd. 4, 3, 2, 1. Fireworks exploded across the Manhattan skyline. Rosie cheered. Bennett laughed. Callum squeezed Vivian's hand, and Vivian stood there, surrounded by people who had chosen her and understood something she had never grasped before. Money could buy buildings. Money could buy influence. Money could buy almost anything in the world. But money could not buy a seat at someone's table. Money could not buy the warmth of a child's arms around your waist. Money could not buy the look in someone's eyes when they saw you as a person instead of a position. Those things could only be given and received by people brave enough to reach out and brave enough to let someone in. 1 year ago, Vivian Ashford stood at the door of this restaurant with nothing but her loneliness. Tonight, she stood at the window with everything that mattered. The fireworks faded. The crowd began to thin. But Vivian did not move. She stood there holding Callum's hand, watching Rosie teach Bennett a complicated secret handshake, and felt something she had chased her whole life without knowing it. Peace. Not the peace of winning. Not the peace of control. The peace of finally knowing where she belonged. Rosie tugged on her sleeve. My Vivian. Yes? Are you going to have New Year's dinner with us every year forever and ever? Vivian looked at Callum. He was smiling. She looked at Bennett. He was smiling too. She looked back at Rosie. Yes, every year, forever and ever. Rosie threw her arms around Vivian's waist. Good, because you're family now, and family means nobody eats dinner alone. Outside, the first snow of the new year began to fall. Inside, they ordered dessert. 4 people at a table meant for strangers who became something more. A CEO who had everything except what mattered. A widower who had lost everything except what mattered. A little girl who saw the world more clearly than any adult. And a brother who never stopped hoping. Vivian looked around the table at faces lit by candlelight and thought about everything that had brought her here. A restaurant that turned her away. A child who waved. A man who offered an empty chair. A year of learning that strength was not the same as isolation. She thought about the woman she had been 12 months ago, standing at that door, hand on the handle, ready to walk back into her lonely life. What if she had left? What if she had been too proud to accept help from strangers? What if she had let fear win? She would have missed all of this. Every laugh, every tear, every moment of belonging she had spent 42 years believing she did not deserve. Callum leaned close. What are you thinking about? Vivian smiled. Empty chairs. He raised an eyebrow. What about them? She looked at their table. 4 seats, 4 people. No space unfilled. I used to think empty chairs were just furniture. Now I understand they're invitations. They're the space we leave for people we haven't met yet. People who might change our lives if we're brave enough to wave them over. Callum squeezed her hand. I'm glad Rosie waved. I'm glad you let her. I'm glad you sat down. Vivian looked at the little girl who had seen a stranger standing alone and decided to do something about it. She saved me, you know, that night. She saved me from spending another year convincing myself I was fine alone. Callum nodded. She has a gift for that. Seeing what people need before they know it themselves. Rosie looked up from her chocolate cake. What are you two whispering about? Callum smiled. About how lucky we are. Rosie considered this. I'm lucky too. I got a Vivian. Bennett laughed. What about me? Did you get a Bennett too? Rosie studied him seriously. I got an uncle. That's different. Uncles bring presents. Everyone laughed, and Vivian felt the sound wrap around her like a blanket. This was what she had been missing. This was what no amount of money could buy. Connection, belonging, home. Later that night, after dessert, after goodbye hugs, after promises to call and visit, and never let 3 years pass in silence again, Vivian walked home through snow-covered streets. But this time, she was not alone. Callum walked beside her, Rosie asleep in his arms, her head resting on his shoulder. They did not talk much. They did not need to. The silence between them was comfortable now, familiar. The silence of people who had found each other against all odds and had no intention of letting go. At her building, Callum stopped. Same time next year? Vivian smiled. Same time next year. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead, soft, brief, full of promise. Then he adjusted his sleeping daughter in his arms and walked away into the snow. Vivian watched until they turned the corner. Then she looked up at her building, 41 floors, penthouse at the top, once a monument to everything she had achieved. Now just a place to sleep. Home was somewhere else now. Home was wherever those two people were. She rode the elevator up alone, but she did not feel lonely. She stood at her window and watched the snow fall over Manhattan, and she thought about everything that had changed since last New Year's Eve. She had learned that strength was not about needing no one. She had learned that success meant nothing without people to share it with. She had learned that the bravest thing she ever did was sit down in an empty chair offered by strangers. Her phone buzzed. A message from Callum. Rosie woke up just long enough to ask if you got home safe. She said to tell you she loves you. I told her I'd pass along the message. Then a moment later, I love you too. Vivian read the words 3 times. Then she typed back, I love you both. See you tomorrow. She set the phone down and smiled. A real smile. The kind that reached her eyes. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, Vivian Ashford stood at her window and watched the city sleep. She thought about empty chairs, about invitations we almost refuse, about the terrifying, beautiful risk of letting people in. 1 year ago, she had walked into a restaurant looking for dinner and found something she did not know she needed. A family, a home, a place to belong. All because a 7-year-old girl saw a woman standing alone and decided she deserved better. All because a grieving father had enough love left in his heart to share his table with a stranger. All because Vivian Ashford, for once in her life, chose connection over control. The snow fell softly over Manhattan. Somewhere across the city, a little girl slept with dreams of unicorns and science and forever families. And Vivian stood at her window, no longer alone, finally understanding the truth she had spent 42 years trying to learn. We are not meant to eat dinner by ourselves. We are not meant to watch fireworks through glass. We are not meant to build empires and live in them alone. We are meant for tables full of people who see us. We are meant for hands that reach out when we're lost. We are meant for children who wave at strangers and change everything. We are meant for love, and sometimes all it takes to find it is the courage to sit down in an empty chair and stay.